This April 2nd, 2026 was a major anniversary. It was actually the 50th anniversary of the ergot theory. Heard of it? I bet you have. The theory that bad bread caused the Salem Witch Trials, that the mold on bread caused people to hallucinate specters and witches, and that's why we got these witchcraft accusations. That theory is 50 years old now.
Happy birthday, Ergot.
Happy birthday, Ergot. Guess who celebrated the birthday of Ergot? You might never guess. Was it Science Magazine that published the original Ergot article? Was it National Geographic or History Channel or Smithsonian? Any of those educational channels you might find on TV or those magazines about history? No. It was the old Entertainment and Sports Programming Network, now known as ESPN. They have a history podcast. Did you know this, Sarah?
I still can't even pronounce it very well. They'd say it well. Stupiracy? Stupiracy? That's what Alexa kept saying to me. I can't find the podcast. Stupiracy. It's Stupiracy.
Stupiracy. It's about stupid conspiracies. So Stupiracy.
Yeah, they like to question the easy answer on that podcast.
Yeah, don't take the easy explanation, dig into it. They like to dig there. And they decided to dig into the ergot theory in their April 2nd episode. So right on the 50th anniversary of the theory being published, ESPN covers it. Sports. Sometimes you get card games and things on ESPN. Now you get witches. Welcome to The Thing About the Salem Witch Trials. I'm Josh Hutchinson.
I'm Sarah Jack. We're descendants of the Salem Witch Trials. And Riz on ESPN talked about my grandmother on his podcast, Rebecca Nurse.
He did. He was talking about, why was she accused and how ergot theory doesn't explain why individual people got accused of witchcraft. So today we're talking about sports. And you might think sports and the Salem Witch Trials are not compatible subjects, but maybe you need to think again. Because at least according to one of the afflicted girls of Salem Village, they pretended to see specters because they must have some sport. So sport was important in people's lives in 1692.
It's in the historical record.
It is. It's in the record. It's written down. They use that word exactly.
Stupiracy is a cool podcast. I was shocked. I shouldn't have been, but I was shocked to see them covering the Salem Witch Trials this month.
It was shocking to see them cover the witch trials until I went and looked at the podcast because I wasn't familiar with it. And it's an ESPN podcast. It's hosted by Scott Riz Rizzuto and Tim McKinnon. And it's a history podcast that promises bizarre tales of stupid conspiracies, hence Stupiracy.
So what happens when two sports guys decide to do a history show and talk about our favorite subject? We got to talk about them talking about it.
We got to talk about what did they say about the Salem Witch Trials? Well, they said that 1692 was a tough time, and they're right about that. They pointed out correctly that there was conflict, disease, and religious anxiety weighing on the people of Salem and Massachusetts.
1 point for Riz and Tim.
There you go. You should start a scoreboard.
I'm just going to keep track as we're talking.
There you go. Keep a tally in there. So, yeah. And then they pointed out that the beginning of the Salem Witch Trials happened in Salem Village. They said that Abigail Williams and her friend Betty Paris got sick. But what do we really know about Abigail and Betty, Sarah?
They were cousins.
They were cousins. And Abigail's age was a little different. She was 11. Betty was about 9. They were Samuel Parris's niece and daughter, and they lived together in the Salem Village parsonage, like you're saying, and they got sick together.
Oh,
Riz and Tim.
1 point for us. We got a point.
Oh yeah, 1
'Cause
point for us.
Abigail was not 8. And she was a friend, probably, but they left
But
out
they were cousins.
relative.
That's a good
I'll
detail.
just take 1 point, even though that could be 2. I'll just take that as 1.
Okay. So we're even now. 1-1, right? The count's 1-1. All right. And Tim and Riz said that the afflicted people were acting like they were possessed, that they were slurring their speech and having other symptoms, talking things that they wouldn't normally say and things like that. And I mean, possession is tricky in the 17th century because the line between possession and bewitchment is very thin. The symptoms of possession and bewitchment are very similar. It all comes down to who is causing the problem. And that really comes down to very subjective evaluations that are done to see, is the devil directly causing this? Is his hand in this? Is there an evil hand in this? Or is a witch acting as the devil agent and bewitching somebody? You see the similar symptoms, people going into fits, saying strange things, seeing things, acting very strangely, barking like dogs and, quacking like ducks and all kinds of flying like geese. That's something that Abigail did. Flew like a geese or goose.
Yeah, but they were afflicted by witches. If it was just a possession, they wouldn't be on a witch hunt.
Yeah, the witch hunt might never have happened if they were able to control the demonic possession through fasting and prayer. That was how those were their 2 tools.
Yeah.
And they tried. In fact, they tried for 6 weeks before anybody mentioned that the girls might be under an evil hand. They were fasting and praying just to drive the devil away.
Salem Podcast 2, Stupiracy 1.
Yay. So then Tim and Riz talked about what actually caused the Salem Witch Trials. Were people faking these afflictions for attention? Were people trying to grab land from their neighbors? Or was this a case of religious fanaticism? Those are all theories that people put out about how the Salem Witch Trials were able to happen in 1692. But the faking for attention, that might have some merit to it, because some of the men, women, girls, and boys who had afflictions were actually caught doing things like sticking pins in themselves and blaming that on witches. People were caught actually in the act of pulling a pin out of their hair and then stabbing themselves with it until the blood came, just to kind of make a point, I guess, about, oh, this is an awful dangerous witch here.
I'm ready to dole some more points out. I can't wait to hear, what did Riz and Tim get right? What did they get wrong about the ergot theory?
Well, they got quite a lot right. They got down that it's 1976. It's started by Linda Caporial, and ergot comes from a fungus called Claviceps purpurea. If you ingest ergot, which grows on rye grains and can get into your bread if you eat it, then you can ingest these alkaloids that cause physiological effects, including hallucinations like you're using LSD or acid. So if you have this ergotism, then you might be seeing things like, say, spectral witches. It's plausible. And they were right about all those details. And then they went in to break down, because there's 2 forms of ergotism. There's gangrenous ergotism and there's convulsive ergotism. And the gangrenous has specific symptoms, including gangrene and limbs falling off and
I
things
would
like that.
I'm sorry, I'm just laughing because when he was like, their fingers are falling off and they don't even realize it, that made me laugh. He said that.
Yeah, Riz said that. Yeah, like they didn't feel it. But um, fingers were not falling off in Salem. There's no reports of any change in the coloration of their skin or the sensitivity of their skin or,
No, in fact, they were finding the
anything.
marks on the alleged witches. They were finding marks on their
Yes.
bodies.
Yeah, it wasn't the afflicted bodies that people were actually worried about. It was what was going on with those witches. And did they have what in the show they called the devil's mark, but we know as a witch's teeth because that's where familiar feeds.
That's right.
So back to the ergotism though. On gangrenous ergotism, Riz said, and this is a quote, then people saw this lack of feeling as proof that an evil spirit was at work. So he's talking about the fingers falling off. And then he says, and the accusers in Salem described burning sensations, which perfectly match a symptom of ergotism that they called holy fire or St. Anthony's fire. And so let's unpack that. First of all, what they got right is it was called holy fire or St. Anthony's fire, ergotism. It's been known about for hundreds and hundreds of years. People knew how to recognize it, by the way. They would have known about it. He said that the accusers in Salem described burning sensations, and that's not so. There were 2 times when accusers did describe burning, and they were both related to activities that could have well caused a burning sensation. One had to do with the judges actually were playing with a puppet, an image like a doll that you can prick or squeeze to hurt somebody, and they set it on fire. And so the afflicted people, the accusers who were there in the courtroom with them, they saw it catch on fire and they started saying that they were being burned. So that's obviously there's a trigger there for that. And the other time, one of the afflicted girls tries to hit one of the accused supposed witches, and her hand just barely grazes the woman's cap. And the girl complains that her hand got burned by grazing the witch's cap. So I don't find truth to the statement that they had any burning sensation that would have matched any symptom from ergotism.
Okay, let's take a point. I think that's 3 for us, 1 for them.
Yay.
So, this ergot theory is being applied to the deaths of real women and some men. Let's remember them. Bridget Bishop of Salem,
Martha Carrier of Andover,
Mary Parker of Andover,
Samuel Wardwell of Andover,
Elizabeth Howe of Ipswich,
Wilmot Red of Marblehead,
Margaret Scott of Raleigh,
George Jacob Sr. of Salem,
Alice Parker of Salem,
Anne Putiator of Salem,
Martha Corey of Salem Village,
John Proctor of Salem,
Sarah Good of Salem Village,
Rebecca Nurse of Salem Village,
John Willard of Salem Village,
Mary Esty of Topsfield,
Sarah Wilds of Topsfield,
George Burroughs of Wells, Maine,
Susanna Martin of Amesbury. And there was one more person who died outside the jail. Giles Corey of Salem Village. Why did he die?
Well, he refused to stand trial. When they asked him if he would stand trial by God and country, he stayed silent. So they were basically what they did to him was pile on more and more weight and stones on top of him until, they were trying to get him to give an answer. So theoretically, eventually they'd hit a mark of weight and he'd give an answer and then they could proceed.
No, he resisted.
But he resisted to the end. Supposedly his last words are, more weight. Um, by the way, that book back there, that big old graphic novel, is most excellent about Giles Corey. More weight.
And what are we talking? 5 adults passed away in jail?
4 adults and an
Oh,
infant. The people who did die in the jails were Sarah Osborne, one of the first women to be accused of witchcraft, Roger Toothaker, a man who claimed that he had used witchcraft against witches to kill a witch with his daughter, Anne Foster, Lydia Dustin, who just couldn't pay her jail bills, so she stayed in jail too long, and Sarah Good's infant daughter also
newborn,
passed in the
essentially. I mean,
jail.
just a couple of
Newborn,
months old.
really just, 2 or 3 months old when it passed. And very sad.
Yeah, they gave it some extra blankets, and that was not enough.
No, those jails were terrible.
Yeah. All right. So there's 2 things. I want to talk about the bread that was actually in the Salem Witch Trials. It's red, just like this, but also a major character they didn't mention.
Who did they not mention?
Old Cratton.
Old Cratton himself, Old Nick.
Yeah, the devil. The very first time that a witch is named, that person is blamed for having the devil's book and asking Abigail to sign it. Why is that significant?
By the 17th century, the theory of witchcraft was that witches got their power because they signed a covenant with the devil. They entered into some kind of pact with him, either verbally or they just made a gesture, or you could get into it anyway. But in Salem, what they love to do is sign the devil's book. And so all of these spectral witches supposedly bring the devil's book to the afflicted people who can see them and push it on them and try to threaten them into signing it and signing their lives and souls over to the devil. Where so this is just proof of witchcraft. It's proof of the diabolical pact. So therefore it's proof that there was a
Allegedly.
witch. Allegedly.
It was their evidence standard.
It was their evidence standard was to take these afflicted people's word for these sightings they were supposed to have that weren't corroborated by any other witnesses. There, you don't have cases of 2 people seeing the exact same thing and reporting on it. So it was very flimsy standard of evidence, the spectral evidence that they accepted. It just was anybody's story of what they supposedly saw.
And
Crazy.
they saw red bread. That is a fun
red bread.
story.
It's fun. I mean, Abigail Williams, for one, supposedly saw witches and spoke to them while they were having a witches' Sabbath at the Samuel Paris parsonage pasture. So they're just outside the minister's house having the Sabbath with red bread and wine like blood.
Oh, this is just beer.
Oh, very sporty though.
Yes.
But Riz and Tim, they came back through and they debunked the ergot theory, which was very good. I was
Points.
pleasantly surprised. Points. All the points. That's a touchdown
50
right there.
points.
That's
50 anniversary
grand
points.
slam, touchdown, victory lap, whatever you want to do. It's the big sports moment. Ergot was not the cause of the Salem Witch Trials.
You don't hear that on many podcasts, do you?
You don't. You hear a lot of speculation about how it might have been, and it was possible that it could have been, but not anybody coming out and saying, no.
They did a great job debunking it.
They did. They went through some facts about it, and they thoroughly debunked it. But what I really like is where they went after the debunking. They said that there was actually something far more sinister at work than ergot, because it was people who were accusing people. It was the adults in charge, the ministers, the doctor who made the diagnosis of under an evil hand, the judges and magistrates, they're the ones who believed these stories and ran with them and prosecuted innocent people. And so I just thought that was a very good point that they brought out to wrap up their show with.
Yeah, they won the game. They won the game with that. Really, there's so much speculation out there. I want to say there's probably thousands of Salem episodes that never actually say what's on the record. And they definitely did.
Right. They were good, and they got a lot of their information from historian Margot Burns. They obviously watched her videos on Ergot and took in what she said about, why it's not Ergot actually. And they went through those things. It was very good. They got good information. Margot was the managing editor of a major project that took 10 years to complete, the Records of the Salem Witch Hunt. It's a compilation of all the legal documents that survive from the Salem Witch Trials. There's like 980 documents in there. It's amazing. Everybody should have it. Margot,
Josh has looked at every record.
Bang up job.
You know how many there are because you've looked at them.
I have. I've actually read that book cover to cover twice. So
thanks, Margot.
But it's an amazing book. We consult it every day for our podcast.
We do.
And thanks, Margot, for doing that. Make sure you check out Margot Burns Historian on Facebook. And we'll have a link in the show notes to her Ergot video. It's wonderful. One thing that we want to point out is that Salem weren't the only witch trials in America, in New England. There were witch trials in Connecticut. We've done a number of episodes on our other podcast, The Thing About Witch Hunts, about Connecticut. So you go check those out.
Wait, isn't it ESPN in Connecticut?
ESPN is in Bristol, Connecticut. That's why I'm talking about Connecticut.
Aha.
They have their headquarters there. And guess what is about 3 or 4 miles away from Bristol ESPN headquarters? Witches Rock in Bristol. There is a legend about this rock. There is Witches Rock Road still today, runs by this old rock. And according to a book called Bristol, Connecticut, which was published back in 1907, they said, whenever Elijah Gaylord drove his ox team down the hill past the rock, the cart tongue would drop to the ground, no matter how securely it was fastened, as it was reputed that he had in some manner incurred the ill will of Granby Olcott, as she was known, a reputed witch who lived in the adjoining town of Walcott. It was supposed that she was the cause of the trouble.
Witch legend, right down the road in their neighborhood.
Just down there. Probably some of them drive past that on the way home. And
hope they have their spare tire.
You might drop an axle or something. We better be careful. And there's another legend about a witch in Bristol. This speaks of a young woman who was grievously tormented, a phrase that we know very well from the Salem Witch Trials. That's an exact phrase used again and again and again.
Grievously.
Grievously. That's how they describe the afflictions. And so this woman in Bristol is grievously tormented night after night by having pins and needles stuck in her flesh by invisible hands. And according to this story, this man named Seth Stiles actually would pull the pins out of her, and he stuck them in a rag, and he held the rag over a fire until it heated up enough that the pins fell out into the base of the fire and burned terribly. And so after he burned all of the pins, the woman was supposedly never troubled with this again. The suspected witch was supposedly found the next day, terribly burned. That's the legend of witches in ESPN's own backyard.
Connecticut actually had a witch trial in 1692 while Salem's was going on. Not a legend, an actual trial.
Actual witch trials involving actual people being actually accused and inspected for those witches' marks that we talked about earlier and made to do the swimming test as well in 1692.
In Connecticut.
Right there. All in all, I liked the Stupiracy episode. I thought it was good that first of all, they set it up as if Ergot was real, and then they pulled the switcheroo and debunked it, and they debunked it well.
What a fun podcast.
Kudos to Stupiracy. It is a fun podcast too. Go check it out. It's awesome. But while you're here, like and subscribe our podcast. Visit our YouTube. It's youtube.com/@aboutwitchhunts. And also check out our podcasts, The Thing About Witch Hunts and Salem Witch Trials Daily.
3 podcasts all about the witch trials, 2 all about Salem.